I remember standing in that oak-paneled room, the lawyer's voice echoing against the silence like a slow-moving wrecking ball. Everything smelled like lemon polish and old secrets. Karen sat across from me, legs crossed, nails perfectly manicured, pretending to dab away tears that weren't there. She leaned into her crocodile performance, whispering to her husband, "Don't worry, he left everything to me. He told me I was his closest real family." I didn't say a word. I had nothing to say. Not until the lawyer hesitated, cleared his throat, and pulled out a second envelope. This one was delivered by Mr. Davis himself, 2 days before he passed. It supersedes the previous version. Karen's fake tears stopped mid-swipe. He began reading, and my hands, they started trembling, not out of fear, but justice. Have you ever sat in a room where someone thought you were too weak, too naive, too quiet to notice what they were doing? Only for the truth to come crashing down like thunder? Let me know where you're watching from if you've ever been betrayed by your own blood. Because what happened next changed everything. My name is Emily Carter, born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina. I was never one for drama. I stayed quiet, followed the rules, and kept my head down. That's probably why they all thought I'd never fight back. But if you want to understand why reading that will change everything, you need to know who he was. Uncle Robert Davis wasn't just an uncle. He was my second father. He was the man who held my hand when my own dad walked out on us. The one who taught me how to change a tire before I even got my license. Who stayed up late helping me with my science project on static electricity, even though he was an architect, not a scientist. I was 9 when he moved back to Charleston after his divorce. He said, "No one should go through pain alone, Emmy. We'll get through this together." And we did. He used to make me pancakes every Saturday morning, extra crispy on the edges, just how I liked them. He always remembered the smallest things. My favorite flower, sunflowers. My first crush, Zach Reynolds, 6th grade. The poem I wrote and buried in the backyard after Mom passed. When I got accepted into NYU, it was Uncle Robert who paid my deposit, even though he never told anyone. "You've got light in you," he whispered at the airport. "Don't let anyone dim it, not even your own family." We didn't talk every day once I moved to New York, but when we did, it was real. No judgment. No fake pleasantries. Just warmth, wisdom, and that deep, calming voice of his. Meanwhile, Karen, my cousin, his step-niece through his second marriage, was always circling around. She'd swing by his house on Father's Day with store-bought cookies and an Instagram story. Post captions like, "Always love visiting Uncle Robert, #family first." Then vanish for another 6 months. But he never said a bad word about her. Uncle Robert saw the best in everyone even when it hurt him. I still remember the last real conversation we had, on a bench near Battery Park. He had come to visit me in New York that fall. He handed me a little box. Inside was a silver locket with a tiny sunflower etched on the back. He said, "This is just in case I'm not around someday. Not for money. For truth." I didn't understand what he meant then, but I would. Sooner than I ever imagined. It started with missed phone calls. When Uncle Robert was diagnosed with congestive heart failure, I found out from the neighbor, not from family. Karen, who had moved back to Charleston 6 months earlier, to be closer to family, had quietly slipped into the caretaker role. At least that's how she described it. But it didn't feel like care. It felt like control. I called his house. "Hi, is Uncle Robert awake? I just wanted to talk for a minute." Karen answered in that sing-song voice of hers. "Oh hey, Emily, he's resting right now. Doctor's orders. I'll tell him you called." This happened 3 times a week. One day, I asked directly, "Karen, does he know I've been trying to reach him?" There was a pause. Then she replied with a dry chuckle, "Of course, hon. But you know he's tired these days. Maybe it's best not to overwhelm him." Overwhelm him? This was a man who once helped me move apartments in the pouring rain and then insisted we reassemble my IKEA bed that same night. Now suddenly I was too much. I booked a flight to Charleston the next week. When I got there, things were different. The family pictures were gone. The living room, once filled with books, puzzles, and model ships, looked sterile. White curtains. No mail on the table. Even the sunflower painting I made for him at 14 gone. I found it in the garage, wrapped in plastic. Uncle Robert looked thinner, weaker. But his eyes lit up when I walked into the room. "Emmy," he whispered. "My sunshine girl." Karen appeared seconds later.
Oh,
"Emily, you didn't say you were visiting." I replied, "I didn't realize I needed clearance." She just smiled, tight-lipped. "Well, don't mind the mess. We've been redecorating." That night, while Uncle Robert slept, I opened the fridge. It was filled with high-sodium frozen meals. The same man who used to grow herbs in his backyard was now being fed microwaved garbage? I asked Karen about it. She waved me off. "He likes those. Besides, I'm too busy to cook every day." Too busy doing what? Posting filtered selfies by the porch swing with captions like #GratefulHeart, #CaregiverLife? I offered to stay the weekend to help. She said no. It's confusing for him when too many people are around. And frankly, I have a routine going. He needs stability. But when I left, Uncle Robert pressed a folded napkin into my palm. It had shaky handwriting. "Come back next weekend. Alone." Things escalated quickly after that. Karen installed a password on his phone. She claimed it was to protect him from spam calls. But even I couldn't reach him anymore, and I was listed as his medical contact. I called his doctor directly. They said they hadn't seen Robert in over 2 months. When I confronted Karen, she snapped. "You don't live here, Emily. You don't know what he really needs. He told me to handle everything. Maybe you should trust his wishes." Something inside me cracked. Uncle Robert would never shut me out. But every time I visited, he seemed a little weaker, and she seemed a little more in control. I noticed unopened mail piling up in the drawer. Bank statements. Legal documents. All unopened. All addressed to Robert Davis and Emily Carter, co-trustee. That's when I knew something was wrong. Not just emotionally. Legally. I called our old family lawyer, Mr. Feldman. He hesitated to speak, said he hadn't heard from Uncle Robert in over a year. "Last I knew," he said slowly, "he was working on a revised will. But then he stopped returning my calls." That didn't sound like him. I began to wonder, had Karen intercepted more than just my phone calls? The final straw came one rainy Friday evening. I showed up unannounced. Karen tried to block the door, but I pushed past her. Uncle Robert was in his room, alone, coughing, pale, and, for the first time, afraid. I held his hand. He looked at me and whispered, "The will she doesn't know," in the nightstand. Karen barged in minutes later. "I think it's time you left." But it was too late. I had already opened the drawer. And what I found there would unravel everything. The envelope was cream-colored, aged at the edges, and sealed with red wax. On the front, in my uncle's familiar cursive, it read, "To be opened only by Emily Carter." Upon my passing, I clutched it to my chest like it was a lifeline. That night, I sat in my old car outside his house, the rain blurring my windshield, my heart pounding in my ears. Should I open it now? Or wait until? I didn't want to think of the until. But 3 nights later, it happened. I got the call at 4:13 a.m. Karen's voice was icy. "He's gone. Just wanted to let you know. The arrangements are already being handled." That was it. "No, I'm sorry. No, you should come." Just cold efficiency, like she was talking about trash pickup. I flew to Charleston the next morning. When I arrived, the house was locked. A printed sign on the door read, "Private family gathering. No visitors." Private? I was his closest blood relative. And yet, I wasn't even allowed to grieve him in his own home. I went back to my hotel, sat on the floor with the envelope in my lap, and finally opened it. Inside were 2 documents. The first was handwritten, a letter, shaky but clear. "My dearest Emmy, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I wish I had more time, more breakfasts, more books, more quiet talks on park benches. But I need you to know this. I changed my will. Not out of anger, but out of truth. You were the one who showed up. The one who listened. The one who saw me. Not for what I owned, but who I was. I've instructed the lawyer to reveal everything in due course. Trust yourself. And trust what you find. Always, Uncle Robert. I started sobbing. Not just for the loss, but for the clarity. For months, I'd been made to feel paranoid, dramatic, selfish. But this letter validated everything. The second paper was a notarized revision of his will, signed 3 months before his death. It listed me, Emily Carter, as the sole executor of his estate. I stared at it in disbelief. I wasn't just included, I was entrusted. With everything. The funeral was 2 days later. Karen was draped in black chiffon, surrounded by friends who called her so strong, hugging her like she was the widow. I stood at the back of the church, clutching his locket in my hand, unseen, but burning with a sense of duty. After the service, the family gathered at the attorney's office. Karen had already poured herself a glass of sparkling water and taken the center seat at the table. Her husband, Daniel, leaned in and whispered, "This is it, babe." The lawyer, Mr. Halston, cleared his throat and began reading the old version of the will. As expected, it listed Karen as primary caretaker, with the estate to be divided among the Davis stepfamily to honor blended ties. She looked smug, smiled at me, but then Halston paused. He looked down, took a breath, and opened a second folder. There is an addendum, signed, notarized, and hand-delivered by Mr. Davis shortly before his passing. Karen's smile cracked. He read the words slowly, letting each syllable land like a gavel strike. I, Robert Davis, of sound mind, hereby declare this as my final will and testament. I revoke all previous versions. I leave my full estate, including property, savings, personal items, and business shares, to my niece, Emily Carter. The room went silent. Karen's eyes widened. Her hands trembled. "That can't be right," she whispered. But it was. She lunged across the table, grabbed the paper, and Halston calmly removed it from her hands. "There's no mistake, Ms. White," he said. He delivered it personally, and insisted it be protected until today. Karen lost it, started screaming about manipulation, lies, and family betrayal. She called me a snake, said I poisoned him against her. But the truth had already spoken. The documents were airtight. And for once the room saw me. Not the quiet girl. Not the background niece. But the woman Uncle Robert trusted with his life's legacy. I walked out of that office holding the folder to my chest, my back straight, my heart still broken, but not defeated. He had seen me. And now, so had everyone else. The next few days were a storm. Karen tried everything. Phone calls, emails, even vague social media posts hinting that I had manipulated a grieving man and torn a family apart. But the truth didn't care about her hashtags. What she didn't expect was that I wouldn't stay quiet this time. It started with a visit to the house. Technically, it was now mine. But emotionally, it still felt like his. Every creak in the floorboards whispered his name. When I arrived, Karen was already there, packing boxes, shoving picture frames into a suitcase like they were hers. I stood in the doorway. Calm. Still. She turned, startled. "Oh. So you're just gonna kick me out like I'm trash?" I didn't flinch. "You were supposed to be taking care of him," I said slowly. "Instead, you were taking inventory." She scoffed. "You think this makes you some kind of hero?" He was my uncle, too. "No, Karen." I cut in, my voice steady. "He married into your side. You called him uncle when it was convenient. I called him family when no one else showed up." She stepped forward, her voice rising. "You think you deserve this? You didn't change his diapers. You weren't there every single day." I held up the folder with the will. "No. I wasn't there every single day because you wouldn't let me in. You silenced his calls. You locked his phone. You gave him frozen meals and told me to stay away." She shook her head, venom in her eyes. He was confused. "Sick. You took advantage." I reached into my bag and pulled out the letter. His words. His truth. I read it out loud. "You were the one who showed up. The one who listened. The one who saw me. Not for what I owned, but who I was. Karen froze. I stepped closer, my voice unwavering now. You thought you could isolate him, manipulate him, rewrite the story after he was gone. But he knew, and he made sure I would too. Her eyes filled with tears, not grief, but rage. This house was supposed to be mine, she shouted. And then, quieter. I had plans. I looked around the room, at the bookshelf we built together, at the sunflower painting I had taken out of the garage and rehung on the wall. He had plans too, I replied. And you erased them. But not all of them. She stormed out that afternoon, left behind broken photo frames, a spilled coffee mug, and one of her fake sympathy cards sitting on the mantel. I sat on the living room floor and breathed. For the first time since he died, I felt like he was sitting beside me again. No more pretending. No more silence. No more stolen legacies. A few days later, I sent her a letter. Short and dignified. All of Robert Davis's belongings are now under the care of his appointed executor. Any further attempt to claim or remove items will be considered trespassing. I hope you find peace, as I have found the truth. Emily Carter. No threats. No drama. Just closure. And to seal it, I did one more thing. I found the last voicemail he left me, the one I'd saved and never deleted. His voice a little hoarse, but still so him. Hey, sunshine. Just wanted to say I'm proud of you. No matter what happens, you keep being exactly who you are. You hear me? You've always had more strength than you know. I played it on a loop that night, sitting on the porch swing he built with his own hands. Karen could keep the filtered posts. I had his voice. And the truth. Grief doesn't knock on your door loudly. It seeps through the cracks. It lingers in the scent of coffee you forgot he used to love. It shows up in the way your breath catches when the phone rings at 7 p.m., the hour he used to call. After Karen left, the silence in the house was both comforting and suffocating. It was his silence now. No more shouting. No more tension. Just memories woven into every wall. The neighbors started coming by. Mr. Jenkins from next door brought over peach cobbler and said, "Your uncle always said you'd come back and make this place feel like home again." Mrs. Lockhart, the woman who used to babysit me and has lived across the street for 40 years, hugged me longer than expected. She whispered, "He talked about you constantly. Said you were the only one who ever truly saw him." Even his old dog, Max, now nearly blind, crawled into my lap that first night and didn't leave for hours. He didn't need to see. He knew. But not everyone was warm. Karen's brother, Trent, messaged me. "You've embarrassed this family." Their aunt, Judith, called and said I had violated sacred trust and chased inheritance like a vulture. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because the real betrayal was never mine to carry. Still, it hurt. There were days I'd wake up and wonder if maybe I had done something wrong. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I should have given them something. But then I'd find a sticky note on the back of a book, written in his handwriting. "Emmy, this one reminded me of your NYU essay. Proud of you." Or an old voicemail on the landline. "Picked up your favorite licorice at the store. Come home soon, sunshine." And I'd remember. This wasn't about money. This was about memory. Legacy. Truth. The hardest part was going through his things. His closet still smelled like cedar and aftershave. His slippers were tucked under the bed exactly how he left them. The toothbrush in the holder. The crossword puzzle half-filled on the nightstand. I sat on his bed and cried for over an hour. Because death doesn't just take the person. It takes the rhythm of them. The background noise you never realized was music until it stopped playing. But slowly, I began to understand what I had to do. I took all the documents, the will, the letters, the original trust papers from when I was 10, and built a binder. Not to protect myself, but to preserve him. The man who chose me, who saw me, who fought through weakness and betrayal just to make sure I knew. I found photos too. Ones Karen had stashed away. There was one of me on his shoulders at age 5, both of us covered in flour from baking cookies. Another from my high school graduation, the only family member who came that day. And one from just last year. Us on that bench in Battery Park. Sunflowers blooming in the background. I printed it, framed it, hung it over the fireplace. People in town started treating me differently. The bank manager called and said, "He always said you'd handle it with grace." The church pastor invited me to speak at the community memorial. Even my old piano teacher, Mrs. Tillman, mailed me a letter. He always said, "Emily plays the world's sorrow like it's a song." He was right. But the most painful part? The realization that my actual blood family, my father, my cousins, even some aunts, never once reached out. Not to ask how I was doing. Not to check on the funeral. Not even to fake interest in his life. They stayed silent. Just like they had when I was young. When I was grieving Mom. When I was navigating college alone. When Uncle Robert stepped in to become the only family who showed up. So I grieved them too. Not with flowers and eulogies. But by letting go. By standing at Uncle Robert's grave, tracing his name carved into stone, and whispering, "I miss you. And I promise I won't carry them with me anymore." It didn't happen all at once. Healing never does. There were still mornings when I'd wake up expecting his voice in the kitchen, humming Sinatra while he made coffee. Still nights when I'd roll over expecting a text that read, "Heard it's raining up there. Wear boots." But little by little, I began to build something new. Not to replace him, but to honor him. The first thing I did was restore the garden. Uncle Robert had loved that backyard. It had gone wild in his last year. Overgrown and neglected, but I remembered where everything was. The rose bushes he trimmed every spring. The little bench under the oak where he used to read. The soil where we once planted sunflowers and buried my mom's favorite necklace, like a secret. I dug it all out, got my hands dirty, and when the first sunflower bloomed, I cried like I hadn't in weeks. I also started therapy. It felt strange at first, talking about grief to a stranger. But Dr. Myers helped me unpack something I hadn't faced, that I'd spent most of my life believing I had to earn love. Be polite, quiet, helpful. Uncle Robert never asked me to earn anything. He gave love freely, fiercely. And now, I had to learn how to give it to myself. I started writing again too. Something I hadn't done since college. At first, it was just short journal entries. Then essays. Then one night, at 2 a.m., I wrote a full blog post titled, "He left me more than a will. He left me myself." I published it anonymously. Didn't expect anything. But within days, it was shared over 20,000 times. People commented from all over the world. This reminded me of my grandmother. I was disinherited too. Thank you for putting it into words. You just helped me forgive myself. It stunned me. How many people were carrying invisible wounds? Grief. Betrayal. Silence. A few months later, I got an email from an editor at a small publisher in Vermont. She said, "If you ever want to turn your story into something bigger, we'd love to help." And just like that, my pain began to transform into purpose. I didn't go back to New York. Charleston had become home again. Not because of geography. Because of legacy. I kept the house, but I opened part of it up. Every Saturday, I hosted Sunflower Mornings, a support group for people grieving loved ones. We drank coffee, shared stories, and planted flowers together. One woman said, "I haven't laughed in months." Another man told me, "This is the first time I felt like I could talk about my brother."
It wasn't therapy.
It was healing. Together. Even Max, old, nearly blind Max, sat on the porch like a guardian angel, tail wagging slow and steady. Kids from the neighborhood came by to read to him. One little girl asked, "Is he your dog?" I smiled and said, "No. He belonged to someone very special. I'm just taking care of his legacy." And then came the day I found the last envelope. Hidden behind a loose panel in the study. Wrapped in twine. Yellowed with age. It wasn't legal. It was personal. A letter to me. Just 5 words, scribbled in pencil. "You did it, Sunshine Girl." I held it to my heart. closed my eyes, and whispered, "So did you, Uncle Robert. So did you." If you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for sitting with my story, for holding space not just for grief, but for truth. Because this wasn't just about a will. It was about what gets passed down when no one else is watching. It was about love, legacy, and the power of being seen. I used to think family was something you were born into, that it was automatic, unshakable. But I've learned something different. Family is who shows up, who fights for you when no one else will, who sees your worth without needing proof. Uncle Robert taught me that. And if you're watching this and thinking of someone who showed up for you, tell them. Call them. Write them a letter. Or just say, "Thank you for being the one who stayed." And if you've been through betrayal, if your truth was buried beneath someone else's performance, if you were told to stay quiet while others stole the credit, the love, the legacy, I want you to know, you are not alone. Your voice matters. Your story deserves to be heard. And your version of the truth? It's valid. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been left out of a family moment that you should have been part of? Was there a time you felt erased, overlooked, or betrayed? And did the truth ever come out? Drop your story below. This is a safe place. This is our space. And if this video spoke to something in you, if it helped you feel a little less alone today, please like, share, and subscribe. Because somewhere out there, someone else is feeling just like I did. Unseen, unheard, unchosen. Let's remind them, they are not forgotten. And one more thing, to the one who thought they could rewrite the story, just remember, the truth doesn't need permission to speak. It only needs one person brave enough to read it out loud. That person might just be you. Thank you for being here.
You're family now.
Stay soft. Stay loud. Stay true. Emily Carter.